What's going on, friends? This is the Year One Wrestling Podcast, the show that dives deep into the early stages and formation of your favorite professional wrestlers, bringing out their struggles, their fears, and most importantly, their most interesting stories. I'm your host, the King of Chaos, Logan Black. Thank you so much for checking us out on whatever platform you enjoy your podcasts on. We're all about showing love here, so if you dig what you hear, if you just feel like being awesome, show some love, hit the subscribe button, leave a review, tell a friend, do what you can, help us get the word out on the show. It's been a really eventful week in independent wrestling, hasn't it? Holy moly. I know I try and stay away from a lot of the negativity that seems to always find its way into professional wrestling. I'd like to think of this podcast being a firm step away from all of that stuff to try and, you could put it on for 45 minutes to an hour and just kind of escape all the craziness and, laugh at the stories and laugh at the ridiculousness of some of this. But at the end of the day, it's hard when these kind of issues just seem to be popping up all the time in professional wrestling. I don't need to get into detail on it. I don't need to jump in and start naming names and pointing fingers. The entire point of this, because I'm going to try and spin it to positive, or else wouldn't be me. It is a good thing, in my personal opinion, that so many women in this business, women who for so many years had kind of been marginalized and had, thumbs put down on them, pushed to the side, used as a sideshow act, are gaining a voice. And it might not be the loudest voice, but it is a voice, and it's a loud enough voice that they're able to come out, speak their minds, be true and legit to who they are because they are professional athletes, and not take bullshit from people who are looking to kind of cast them in a somewhat negative light. I don't think it's a secret because I've said it countless times, both on here and in plenty of other places. I think that Lufisto will be remembered once she finally decides to hang up the boots, hopefully not for quite some time, as one of the pioneers in professional wrestling in general, not just for women. But again, I'm going to run down the accolades of this woman as I understand it. The first woman to hold traditionally men's championships in the United States, despite being a Canadian professional wrestler. She helped to break down the commission in Quebec as it pertained to intergender wrestling, so she's a pioneer of intergender wrestling. And all around, just an incredible performer. Her giving some power to the voice of we're going to be taken seriously, I think is a wonderful thing. And then just seeing so many women stand up in solidarity. Goddamn, that to me is all you could really ask for as one of those, champions of speak up, speak out, and get angry and do something positive with it. You can't ask for anything better. So to all of my sisters in this business who are taking a stand against any type of mistreatment from other wrestlers or promoters, hats off to you, massive salute. I stand right there in solidarity, right behind you, because it is your time to stand ahead and have your voice be heard. As a side note to trying to support everybody in pro wrestling, a lot of independent wrestlers, a lot of your indie darlings, so to speak, as Gabby Ortiz put it last week on the podcast, are hurting right now. It's the majority source of income for a lot of people, so, take care of yourselves, take care of your families first and foremost, but if you have that extra cash to throw around, Pro Wrestling Tees, what a maneuver. Plenty of other sources to be able to help these guys out. Get yourself a t-shirt of some sort. I got a really awesome Gabby Ortiz hoodie. Do what you can to try and help us out during these hard times. For me personally, I've got a Pro Wrestling Tees store. Everything that is being sold on that store for the month of May, every cent that I would make in profit is going directly to feeding America. So please, by all means, guys, do what you can, help out plenty of people, and if you want to help a good cause and get a dope shirt from me, go right ahead and do that. I'm going to give a special shout out to my sister from another mister, the one known as Big Juicy. She is an independent professional wrestler, just getting her start in the New England area, and she's awesome. She picked up a couple of shirts because, obviously she wants to, walk around in style, but beyond that, she knows that helping charities at this time when you have the ability to do so is a good look. So I got to give a shout out to her. Make sure to check out her stuff. She is on social media. You can check out Big Juicy all over the place. But she does what I guess would be a personal journal, an interactive personal journal, every weekend, as she calls it, the Juice Bar, which I think is a pretty dope name. So check that out. Interact. She's awesome. Make sure to go ahead with that. And then again, if you can, hop on to my Pro Wrestling Tees. Oh, almost forgot, guys. Memorial Day week, they're doing a sale at Pro Wrestling Tees. So if there's any time for you to pick this stuff up, again, help your indie darlings out and help out a good cause in my case, go for it at that point. You get dope discounts coming your way. But off to this week's guest, none other than Brian Fury. If you're not too familiar with Brian Fury, well, first of all, that sucks to hear. But if you're not too familiar with him, I would suggest going ahead and looking at the playlist that this podcast put out on our YouTube account. The reason I say that is because you get to see the type of talent that Brian has been in the ring with on high-level independent shows. You're talking about a guy who's literally been everywhere and done everything. And not only has he done that, but he has trained some of the absolute best in the game right now. I'll get to that in a moment. But seeing the caliber of wrestlers that Brian Fury has been in the ring with should really tell you just what kind of performer Brian was before he decided to finally hang up the boots in terms of full-time wrestling. Brian is the head trainer of the New England Pro Wrestling Academy. Just gonna rattle down some of the names to come out of that spot. My good buddy, Retro AG. You've got Josh Briggs. You've got Dominic Dijakovic from NXT. You've got Sasha Banks from WWE. That's just a few. If we really want to go into, we could drop names on Flip Gordon from Ring of Honor, Christian Casanova, who's an absolutely unreal performer. The fact that guy doesn't have a contract is insane to me. So many others you could seriously check. There's lists all over the place of all the wrestlers that Fury has trained that are all working on a high level. Beyond the fact that that speaks about how good of a performer he is, how good of a trainer he is, the dude has always just been a fantastic human being. I'd come in contact with him working, again, the New England scene as I often do, and Brian was routinely in main events on all of those shows, like every single one. Brian Fury was a guy in that area where if you were bringing in a top-level performer, you could put him in there with Brian Fury and they'll have a banger of a match. Every single time out. I'll never forget, and a former guest of the show, Chus Neff, can also attest to it, Brian had an unbelievable match against then Tommy End, currently Aleister Black, in front of, a couple hundred fans in Connecticut, that just all of us, the entire locker room emptied out to watch this, because it was just a brilliant exhibition of professional wrestling. Unbelievable stuff. But on the personal level, Brian is somebody that I looked up to as a wrestler, someone I looked up to as a trainer. I can't tell you the amount of times that I stole drills from him, just watching what the guys were doing at New England Pro Wrestling Academy. So it was really great to actually sit down with Brian and not just bullshit about, wrestling and what was going on that night, but actually to talk about his history in the business, him breaking in. I was under the impression that he had started out as a trainee of Steve Bradley, but I was wrong. Actually, Brian started out as a trainee of the Lobster Man. And if you guys are not familiar with the Lobster Man, Brian gets into some detail about how much of a character the Lobster Man was. This is a really fun interview. If you're a wrestling fan in general, you're really going to enjoy a lot of the stuff we talk about because, man, there are some deep cuts in here in terms of just references and, things that are going on. I'm just going to cut right to the chase and hop right into this interview. Hope you love it. Brian Fury on the Year One Wrestling Podcast. All right, with Brian Fury. Brian, how are you doing tonight?
I'm fantastic, man. How are you?
Oh, I'm just doing just dandy. I've got my peach mango green tea next to me, as always, so I'm feeling pretty good.
Wow. Ready to go.
Yeah, I know. I'm all bougie over here. So, I'm just going to get right into it, right off the bat. You are one of those trainers who has trained countless stars, but I'm going to list a few of them just to butter you up so you treat me nice on here. Off the bat, you got Sasha Banks. You've got Dijakovic is the proper pronunciation at this point. Flip Gordon, Retro AG, Josh Briggs, Kevin Koo. Anybody else that I'm forgetting?
Oney Lorcan started with me. You can go there. You got people on the indie scene. Christian Casanova's out there too. He's another one of my guys.
Can't forget Christian.
Yeah, I got people everywhere.
Yeah, one of those guys who's trained everybody, and I always put over New England Pro Wrestling Academy as being a spot that if you're serious and you're in the Boston area, there's no reason for you not to be going over there. So now, going from your students to you as a student, what is it? Did you have a background at all in wrestling or any kind of sports at all?
I wrestled for like 3 years in high school. I wasn't very good because I didn't start until like my sophomore year of high school, so I didn't really have a lot of experience going against, some people that had trained since they were like in preschool and stuff, but I did okay, nothing special. Other than that, I played like 1 year of Little League. I was terrible. They stuck me out in right field. I caught one ball all season that got hit to me. It was about it. I think I didn't get any hits. But I was always like athletic. I'd always be one out and about and active and doing things. But no, I didn't really do a lot of sports. I just always wanted to be a wrestler. So I was just waiting for that opportunity.
Yeah, pro wrestling was the thing that, drew you in outside of any other kind of athletics.
100%, yeah.
So what year did you get your start, and where did you get your start in pro wrestling?
I started training in August of 1999. I started in Nashua, New Hampshire, a little place, second floor of like some old mill building. You hear the stories all the time. Walk up the rickety metal steps outside, the second floor. The place was owned by the Lobster Man, Jeff Costa.
Oh, boy. Okay, I remember the Lobster Man.
Yeah, so I was originally trained by the Lobster Man. Well, he didn't necessarily train me, but that was the place where I originally started my training, was with the Lobster Man, yes.
Pretty fantastic. I mean, Lobster Man is one of those guys who would always show up in the I don't want to call them the dirt sheets, but they were like, the wrestling magazines at the time of just like the independent showcase. You would always see pictures of the Lobster Man.
Oh, yeah, he was ridiculous. And then he also garnered some fame on Comedy Central's The Daily Show, because he was running for president for a long time. He was the leading candidate for the Crustacean Party.
Rarely am I speechless. That's kind of just one of the most ridiculous things I think I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, Jeff was like the epitome of carny, like a carny type guy. So that's kind of like where I got my start, was like definitely all carny type feel.
So you show up to training the first day. Was he the person who ran the school itself?
So he owned it, but he didn't really run it necessarily. I started at a time when, like, after he would be at the school, like I know a couple people, obviously now that I'm friends with them, had trained there for a while before me, and Jeff was the guy that did all of their training. But when I started, it was kind of like the other boys were training the boys. It wasn't like one particular person that was there. Maverick Wild was a guy there. I guess he'd be kind of one of the guys that was kind of in charge of training a little bit. Another guy by the name of Rip Morrison was around, kind of helping with training. But at that point in time, the Lobster Man kind of checked out and was just kind of collecting money and running the shows and whatnot.
So what was his pitch to you when you first showed up there, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, walking up those metal stairs? What was the pitch to you that made you say, well, damn it, I need to be trained here with the Lobster Man?
Well, one of my friends that I went to high school with, Justin Powers, Justin Shape, he wrestled under a bunch of different names, had already started training there. Him and I were both going to go there and start training together. He went. I decided to help out coach the high school wrestling team. My high school was hosting like the New Hampshire Class L championships or something, so I went there. And I just didn't go. But Justin went, and he wrestled for like a year or so. And so finally I just decided, like, I need to go. I need to train. And so for me, it wasn't like there was any other place to go. This was where my buddy Justin was already training and wrestling. So this is going to be the place that I go. It's close to my house. I know that, Justin's out there on shows, so I'll be able to do it. So it wasn't necessarily a pitch where he had to sell the place on me. The place was kind of already sold on me, and I just kind of had to make the commitment. I remember going and doing what they called like a tryout, which was, let's see how many push-ups you can do. Let's see how many squats you can do. If you get to 100, stop. And then it was like some basic following directions, like standing in the middle of the ring, go out the right side between the bottom and middle, walk around 3 sides of the ring, just things like that to see if I could remember spots or wasn't, a complete moron. After that, I just had a meeting in the office with them. They gave me a price, and it was something that I really wanted to do. So I remember going to my bank the next day. I got a little personal loan and went back the day after that and just paid them in cash and paid off a loan for wrestling school. That's really what I wanted to do.
Seems like a common thread amongst a lot of people that I've spoken to that have broken in prior to, I'd say, the mid 2000s, where you have that tryout, as they put it, which at this point now you're running your own school. I think we're all kind of where it's not necessarily a tryout as much as it is just kind of making you feel like it is one. At least that's how, a lot of people I've had explained it to me as.
Right, yeah. When I think back at it, I'm like, man, it's not really – I don't think they would have turned me away. I think they kind of just wanted to see what I was capable of and how I was or wasn't, in shape or whatnot. So they kind of wanted to see what I was able to do. And I remember, like, I was in shape, not like crazy in shape. I was small and skinny, but I would work out often. So, like, I remember being able to do a ton of push-ups. I think I got to, like, 70 or something like that, which I couldn't friggin' do 70 now.
Yeah.
But like back then it was like, okay, 70 wasn't a big deal, but I just didn't want to stop. I didn't know what they were thinking. I knew I was in better shape than Justin, who brought me there, but at the same time it was like, you still want to kind of impress these guys, just kind of show them what you're capable of and what you're made of.
Now that makes perfect sense. So you get in there, you do your tryout, you take out that loan, we're all set. Now you show up for the first day of training. Talk us through that first day. Well, first of all, what did they have you do in your first day?
So I didn't even get in the ring my first day. Everything was outside of the ring. And I remember I got paired up with a guy named Mikey, who wrestled as the Convict, real original gimmick there. But he was just returning. He had been gone for a while, and he was just coming back. So we were on the outside of the ring. I remember going over, like, lockups, some chain wrestling type stuff, hammer locks and things of the like. Just real basic stuff. It was just over and over and over again. Maybe I got in the ring at the end of class a little bit to learn how to bump, because I remember not getting bumping right away. I remember going home and practicing on my bed, because I had like just a box spring and mattress on the floor. I didn't have like a bed frame or anything, so it was easy for me to just kind of practice on my bed. And I came back the next time, and when I was bumping the second time, whether that was class 2 or 3, I was better at it, but still really not the best. But yeah, it was mostly just outside of the ring. Let the other experienced people have the ring, and just go over the chain wrestling and things along those lines on the outside of the ring.
So you leave training that day. What's going on in your head?
I just thought it was awesome. I remember, Justin and I traveled to and from training together, so it was obviously talk all the time about wrestling and this and that and whatever else. I remember going home and I learned a hammerlock, so I would put my mom in a hammerlock. Show, this is what I learned today. Put her in a hammerlock and different things. Like, it was just cool, just trying to commit everything to memory. For me, I had been a fan of wrestling literally my whole life, since I was like 6 or 7 years old, and it was like all that I watched and studied. And I was a huge, growing up in the Northeast, WWF fan. I wasn't like a casual fan. I like studied everything about wrestling, the moves, how to do them. I would do stuff like that on my own. So I had a lot of natural wrestling instincts, I guess you could say. But it was just trying to remember how they taught me and how to do it, so you're not killing your opponent and stuff.
How long in there did it take before you actually got to apply a lot of that, those moves that you had studied? I mean, did they hold off on you for months, or did it take a couple of weeks to get those in?
As far as what, like how long I'd be able to start doing things like that?
Right, cause, yeah, you mentioned like studying wrestling, which I think that everyone kind of jumps into that, but there's a lot of different ways that like schools will hold you back from doing certain things. Like, did you actually get to apply any of that knowledge that you had quickly, or did it take a lot more training for them to let you start getting that in?
No, things were pretty quick for me. Again, like I said, it was kind of like the boys were kind of the people training me, and so when ring time came, it was like, hey, just get in there. This is how you do a hip toss. They showed me like once or something, and then I would just start doing it. And then I remember doing matches or things in class, like maybe a month in even, because that was how things were taught back then, at least amongst the boys. Because again, Jeff wasn't doing the training. It wasn't like, hey, here's 1,000 repetitions or something. And I just kind of was able to fill in a lot of the blanks because I've been watching wrestling for so long. I wasn't scared or nervous to mess up. I preferred, if I did mess up, they could just tell me, no, this is not what you do. And then I would just learn that way instead of not trying something and messing something up. So I was in there doing things and having match type scenarios and stuff very, very early on.
It sounds like you and me had a similar type of breaking in, so to speak, talking to Berger and some other people where they talk about, oh, well, it took me 6 months to get my first match. Whereas you mentioned like you were put in that situation a month in. I was about a month in as well. I certainly wasn't ready for it either, but, of course,
right.
Fed me right to the wolves.
Yeah, I had my first match on a show at like right around 3 months, right at 3 months in. And I think I was ready for the match and the level of the shows that they were putting on at the time. Like I didn't stick out like a sore thumb or anything. Obviously, when I was out there, I knew I was green, but the people couldn't tell that, I didn't look out of place or anything. And they put me in there with Justin, my buddy Justin, so that was cool. But it's not like I was in over my head being in there that early, which is, cool.
Yeah, certainly is helpful when you're out there in a new setting.
Right, yeah.
So outside of your buddy that you joined with, who else was breaking in at that time or was training with you at that time? Throw some names out there. Anybody people might know, anyone that stuck out to you specifically that people might not know?
So Johnny Vegas was there, and Johnny Vegas actually currently now helps me out at my school a lot. He's still around and still helps things out. And a guy by the name of, he wrestled as Morbius. He's now one half of Nightbreed up here in the Northeast, Setherin. He was there. And then probably most famously, but not that he was famous, Alex Arion, who is a huge Northeast standout up here, was around here and there training. And he really stood out to me and helped me a lot as far as how to be a babyface and how to sell and stuff.
So 3 months in, you get your first match. Did you use the same name that you have now? Were you using a different gimmick? Who christened you with the gimmick if you had one?
So I didn't really have like a gimmick. I didn't even know that I was going to be wrestling. Like I was doing some refereeing at the time for shows. It was a way that Jeff kind of had us. When I say Jeff, I mean Lobster Man. It's just his name. It's the way Jeff would kind of get us used to being out there in front of a crowd a little bit and hear wrestlers talking and whatnot. So you would ref. And I was refereeing a couple matches here and there, and I assumed I was just driving up there to ref on the show. And they told me, no, you're going to have your first match tonight. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't have a name. I didn't have anything. My buddy Justin was the one that christened me Brian Fury. And that name has kind of just been there forever. It wasn't really a gimmick. They called me Flying Brian Fury because back then I was like 175 pounds and I would do a lot of high flying type stuff or, a lot different than what I, became. But so it wasn't really much of a gimmick as much as just this young kid wrestling. I ended up using some of Justin's older gear. It's funny if you see it. It's like a full bodysuit, just minus the sleeves. So I'm like completely covered except for my arms. It's pretty wild.
I'm trying to imagine this kind of like I don't know if you've seen Lucas Calhoun from Chikara, like the sleeveless kind of bodysuit Elvis type thing. Okay. Yeah. That sounds absolutely fantastic to me.
Oh, it was glorious.
So you show up for that first match. Walk us through it. Like what's going on in your head again? You and I very parallel kind of lives on that. I showed up first night to ref and was told it was my first match as well. So it's similar situation. What's going on in your head?
Did you get to actually ref any matches?
So here's how it worked for me. I showed up with a ref shirt ready to go for it, and Johnny goes, "Oh, you gonna wrestle tonight, Pa?" So he put me in a battle royal, which opened the show. The second match on the show was my match. It was 3 minutes long, and then I refed 2 matches on the card later on.
Oh, wow.
Which, right, Johnny Rods is Johnny Rods.
Double duty. So you got double the pay, right?
Oh, I got, all that pay. All that money. I don't think I even got a handshake or a hot dog that night. But for you, going out there, wrestling your friend, the guy that, was the reason that you picked that school, going in there, Did you guys talk about ever wrestling each other? Did you have any ideas going in, or were you just like, let's just go?
No, we were pumped. Like, we were super excited. And obviously they talked to Justin a lot about making sure, like, and he knew, like, the responsibility of, like, what it was like to, like, take care of somebody on the first match and whatever else. Like, boy, Jeff, like, again, Jeff being old school and carny, like, Lobster Man was very odd. And the night of my first match was, like, a night of that lives in infamy for that company. Like, Jeff was doing live commentary over the house mic.
Yeah, that's Johnny Rod style as well.
Throughout the evening. So it's like, it's hokey as hell and whatnot, but he's also like kind of calling the match for Justin, or helping him out some, or telling him when to, like, we should go home and stuff.
Oh my God.
So yeah, he's like, oh, this could be a main event anywhere, especially in Chicago, like over the microphone, like that type of stuff. Like, the people there have no idea, but obviously, like, we knew. But I was just listening to Justin, trying to hear whatever he was telling me to do, and the match went, I don't know, like 6 minutes long. Like, we didn't have anything like crazy. It was a pretty simple babyface heel match. You know, I got to go over in my first match, which was neat, as babyface. And I remember him getting, like, yelled at and spoken to for a very long period of time because he didn't go home when they told him to go home over the house mic. And it was like, I had no part in that because I was just the new guy listening. But I got to hear about it the whole ride home. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. Johnny would do very similar things, except, I mean, I don't think Johnny was as charismatic as the Lobster Man, where he would literally just be like, oh, I think it's time to go home.
Yeah. No, Lobster Man, yeah. So, real quick, before I wrestled, I did ref a couple matches, but the first match that I ever ref, this is notable, was Lobster Man versus Homozuna.
All right, hold on. We're full stop right here. Homozuna.
Yes, the sissy sumo, Homozuna.
No. Go ahead.
So, I mean, talk about first time being in a ring in front of a crowd and seeing, like, how characters, because there certainly wasn't a lot of wrestling in that match, but how characters and having life can really work a crowd in one way, shape, or form. But yeah, that was kind of like my christening into being out in front of a live crowd, was refereeing Lobster Man versus Homozuna.
I swear, I'm putting it out there right now. As soon as this podcast goes out, and I'm 100% serious when I say I will pay somebody a stupid amount of money if they could find me Lobster Man versus Homozuna. It's honestly, that to me would be the holy grail. That would go up there with The Voice versus Rockshaw, which is like the I don't know if you're familiar with, but that's like literally the New York, New Jersey epic encounter match of, like, all time.
Oh man, it sounds like it'd be a great time.
Oh my God, Homozuna versus Lobster Man, sweet Christmas. That's brilliant. So I don't know how you move on from that. I think we've hit our high spot. Now we go home, but there's so much more to go with. Talk to me about your first road trip. Who were you with? Where'd you go?
Boy,
what was it about?
At that point in time, again, Jeff being very carny, we weren't necessarily really, like, allowed to wrestle other places. So it was just Jeff's that we were kind of wrestling at. But at the same time, I was so sheltered, I didn't realize there was really anything else out there. So most of the car trips early on, at least the first, like, 5 or 6 months of my career, were all very close to home. And I would just travel with Justin everywhere. I remember, like, finishing a show and we'd rush home because there was, like, this nightclub in our hometown that we'd go out to, like, which is insane to think about now because, one, I don't like to leave my house, and two, I certainly wouldn't want to go to a friggin' nightclub. So early on, there wasn't really a ton of road trips for me. Everything was pretty close to home. I was very sheltered. It would be just him and I traveling just about everywhere, and I'd known him since, I want to say, like, 8th grade. So him and I are old friends.
as you started to branch out from working only the Lobster Man's promotion, which again, I'm going to keep saying this because it seems to be working out, parallel lives here. Johnny was very much about you cannot work anywhere else. If you work somewhere else, you had the quote unquote vets come down on you for disrespecting the school.
Right.
And I use, quote unquote for a reason because, only doctors go to school for 10 years. So once you did start branching out there, what were some of the local promotions that gave you your first break?
So I remember I did a couple shots for this company called Green Mountain Wrestling, based out of Vermont. Gary Langevin was the guy that owned and ran that, and Tanya Cornell kind of helped out with them. TC Tapes.
Oh yeah, Tanya.
Yep. So I've known her since very early on in my career. She helped out with them, and she did a lot of the filming and stuff for them. That's where I met her very, very early on in my career. I did a couple shots for Sheldon Goldberg and New England Championship Wrestling. I was on the first show I ever did for them was once again against Justin, and that was on the very first birthday bash that they did. That was my first match for them. I remember that show, it was just wild, seeing all these different people that I'd never really seen before, or it was just like a whole new world there, because Green Mountain was a lot of the guys that I knew already. But when I went down to NECW, there's quite a bit of new faces and different things. From there, a couple other places. But when I wrestled for NECW, they already had a kid there named Turbo Tim Fury. And so without asking, they just changed my name and announced me as Brian Jury. So I was randomly Brian Jury for 2 years at NECW and one other company, and everywhere else I was Brian Fury. So it's a really weird time for me at the beginning of my career.
I'm gonna have to look up some of these Brian Jury matches.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be better off not to, but go for it. I'm sure they're very enjoyable.
So with a lot of these spots, what is there any match that sticks out to you as being something that either taught you something specific or against an opponent that really helped up your game? Anything really stick out to you?
So pretty early on, there was a place called MWF, Millennium Wrestling Federation, and they booked me against Slick Wagner Brown. And that was the first time I'd ever met Slick. And that was the first time I kind of had a spotty type match. And I realized there's a different type of wrestling other than the type of wrestling that Lobster Man and stuff was putting on. Obviously, I wouldn't be that type of crazy character or over the topness, but I didn't realize there was how much you could do in a match. And trust me, with Wagner back then, you did quite a bit. So I didn't really and then I also, I don't want to say I was taken advantage of, but he was still with April Hunter at the time, and I remember getting shit when I came back because I let her body slam in the outside of the ring, which if you think about it nowadays, that's a common thing, intergender matches and everything. But back then, in 99, 2000, people were why the hell would you let her body slam you and this and that? And I was she's my size. What do you want me to say?
I mean, if anyone knows April Hunter, she was a bodybuilder at the time, right?
Yep.
Yeah, she was huge.
She was a big girl.
Yeah. I mean, I think that really does speak a lot to the difference between where wrestling has evolved to right now as opposed to where it was even just a couple of years ago, where again that old school mentality of don't let a manager do it to you, and then B, don't let a woman do that to you.
100%. It's all night and day now. It also depends on who you talk to as well. It depends on how old school or whatnot the person is. Because old school people still obviously are dead set against it versus people that are more progressive, understand it and work it. When it comes to intergender, this is a way off topic, obviously. I'm of the belief I'm not against it. It can work as long as it's worked in the correct manner, but that's neither here nor there.
No, I mean, I think it's definitely a conversation that needs to be had with everyone because, if things are moving forward and, it's getting to a point where that stuff does make money. I mean, there's no denying it. And this is a business,
Oh, right. Yeah.
Bar none. So if it's going to make somebody money, then I think at that point people are eventually going to be, no matter where you stand, old school, new school, if it's making money, I think everyone likes that.
Exactly.
So all the experiences you had in that first year, and then, kind of working around all the stuff that we've talked about. How do you feel all of those experiences have shaped you into the person you are now, both as a wrestler and as a trainer?
Man, I mean, the stuff from year one, it's like, it's just crazy to think back and look because of how much everything for me like changed, a couple of years later when I started training somewhere else. So it's like, I look at that time as a time when there was a lot of camaraderie between the people there. And because it was like an old school thing and everybody just wrestled there, that was the group that I was like super close with. And I realized that it was like more friendship than like a business there in that area. So, in that sense, like I tried to take that with me everywhere I went and become buddies with people rather than just, we're going to be working with each other. But man, it's just, I learned a lot about characters in life more than anything else, I guess, there when it comes to like in-ring type product.
First of all, where did you end up training after Lobster Man?
So after Lobster Man, it was probably like 3 years in, I switched and started training with Steve Bradley, who was a WWE developmental guy that when he was released, he came home, moved to New Hampshire, and he opened up a school in Manchester, New Hampshire, which is like 15, 20 minutes away from Nashua. And I realized, like, if I wanted to take my career to the next level, I needed to train with somebody that was at that next level and trained with all those guys. Like, if you don't know who Steve is, like, look him up because Steve was like the man.
I was gonna say at the time, Steve Bradley was one of those guys that like everyone was talking about because he was on the radar for so long and he was so damn good. And I mean, like I brought up your training acumen and all the people you've trained. Steve trained superstar after superstar.
Yeah, Steve had a big impact on everybody in the New England area. But also before that, like he was training a lot of people and working with people in the developmental. He basically trained Kurt Angle, lived with Kurt Angle, trained Kurt Angle, and Kurt Angle even thanked him in his Hall of Fame speech. So, I mean, that's the type of thing that Steve Bradley was like capable of. He was like the guy that everybody said was going to be like the breakout guy of developmental, and it just never happened for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, that was just a weird time for developmental, to be honest. Like, it was just so many of those guys who were incredible technicians were just kind of put to the wayside. And, you get guys like Brackus. I know Brackus was a bit before that time, but, that kind of deal where they were
Right.
they were looking for something specific. And despite the fact that Steve could work his ass off, it just unfortunately wasn't in the cards.
Right. Yeah. No, Steve. And that was one of those things that I took with me, and I teach to my students, like when they talk about like first impressions being a big thing, Steve feels no matter how much he changed being in their developmental and changed his body and learn how to work, that they always pictured him of what the kid that they signed was, not who they had at that point in time. So that's why I say, like, make sure you're ready and able before you get in front of people, because sometimes that first impression will just be what they stick with forever.
Would you say that's kind of one of the main points that you drill home to your students?
Well, for me, when people always ask me like, oh, how come, I'm not moving on more? How come I'm not in the advanced ring? How come I'm not on shows yet? And I just tell them because like, and they kind of see this eventually, but it's like, I don't put people out there until they really are truly ready. I don't want you in front of a crowd until, you are fully prepared and able. And yeah, I know you've mentioned this, and a couple of other people have mentioned this before. Like when you see students come out of my school, you're like, wow, they're really good. I'm like, that's because I really work them hard and make sure that they're at that level before I allow them to go start working shows and stuff. And even when I do allow them to start working shows, there's certain ones in the area that I'll send them to first so they can get experience in front of a crowd or doing different things. Like I want their first impression of people in the crowd and even the boys in the back to be like, wow, okay, like this person really knows what they're doing. You've only been wrestling how long on shows? Oh, wow, that's crazy. Like, so that's a big thing that I really impress on the students.
So as a trainer, what would be the advice that you would give to day one Brian Fury walking in? He doesn't go to Lobster Man. He comes to you at New England Pro Wrestling Academy. What are you going to tell him? What is the advice you're going to give?
Shut up. You are not all of that just because you're like in shape. Like just be quiet and keep your eyes open and mouth shut. That's the biggest thing. I got in trouble a lot because I was one of those guys that, I didn't understand. I always voiced my opinion or this or that and whatever else. And like that got me in trouble a lot of different places. And to the point where I remember like telling some of my students, I remember Julian Starr, even Flip Gordon. I was like, look, like, I get it. You're good. You're better than everybody else in class right now at these drills and different things, but you need to just like shut up and just like understand your place in things and how things go, because you remind me a lot of me when I first started. So yeah, just be quiet and just enjoy everything more and not try to be like this badass tough guy loudmouth kid.
Yeah, shut up is the best advice I think any student could get. Just breaking in. So as we wind things down here, I always like to, for me especially, that first year always brought the most ridiculous, crazy human beings that you come across within wrestling. There's nothing quite like that first year's class of people that just go, damn, what is going on with that human? You happen to have brought up training under the Lobster Man. So
yeah.
Off the bat, I'm gonna ask you, was the Lobster Man the most unique personality that you came across early on?
Lobster Man and Maverick Wild both. I mean, Lobster Man is, as you can tell, he's crazy. He's legit like a lunatic, but he's really smart in a lot of ways too. A lot of things that I learned from him, you just can't like put into words really. But he just come up with all these crazy gimmick ideas or different things. I remember him talking about how he wanted to start recording stuff at the school for TV, and the whole thing would be a green screen. Everything would be a green screen except for the ring and the wrestling. And he wanted to, when you watch it on TV, like the green screen would be space. So it'd be wrestling in space. Just because people flipping through the channels, they'd go, what the hell is this? These guys are wrestling in space. And just so they would just want to stop and watch to see what it was. Whether they liked it or not, they would keep it on. He wanted to do things like, if I threw a drop kick, they would be like the old school Batman TV show where it'd be like, pow, or you'd see the bottom of my feet just pop up on the screen. It would say like, eat this, and it would cut back to the action. Like just weird different things that he wanted to do that obviously never saw the light of day, but he just had crazy ideas all the time coming out of his head.
Any fun, interesting Maverick Wild stories?
Maverick, if you've ever met Maverick, he is very loud, borderline abrasive, and just crazy. He's just always on. There's never an off switch with him. He's just always like over the top. There's nothing in particular I can really think of that stands out for me. Just him in general as a whole is just crazy, crazy, crazy.
Brian Fury, where could people get at you on social media or anything else? Any plugs you got to throw out at us?
Yeah, sure. Social media for me on Twitter and Instagram is Brian X, Fury X. That's the old straight edge salute there with the 3 X's in it. The school is at NE Pro Wrestling on Instagram and Twitter as well. Then also Chaotic Wrestling, chaoticwrestling.com. At Chaotic Wrestling. Follow, like, retweet, whatever else, all the other fun stuff. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thank you again so much for joining me on this. Completely unrelated to anything else. I think you're well aware of how much I respect you, and I genuinely appreciate you being on the show.
No, I appreciate it. It's a cool idea for a show. It's very unique, a little different than everything else that's going on out there, and I appreciate you thinking of me and wanting to have me on.
Of course, man. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Huge thanks to Brian Fury for joining us on the show. Can't tell you how much I appreciate not only him coming on, but also all the contributions he's made to wrestling. Seriously, you're going to see lots and lots more of his handiwork on TV in the coming years. But before we get out of here, you should go ahead and give us a follow on all social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at year1pod. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel on your preferred podcasting app and leave a review. Our YouTube page is up and running. New stuff added almost every single day. Year One Podcast on YouTube. Shout out to Heroes for the Music. You can check them out on Spotify. Shout out to Joanna Robinson for all the artwork and design, Julie Chan on all social media. Shout out to the Funkenstein Wrestling Superstore for sponsoring the show, located at the Englishtown Flea Market in Englishtown, New Jersey, and on eBay. Make sure to check them out and give them a like on Facebook for all of your wrestling merch needs. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of the Year One Wrestling Podcast. I'm Logan Black telling you, be awesome to each other. Peace and love.